So by 8 o'clock tonight, a very specific and totally invisible battery inside your brain is going to be completely dead.
Yeah, completely drained.
Right. And it's the exact same battery that you rely on to, resist eating junk food or to keep your temper in check when someone sends you a passive-aggressive email.
Or to force yourself to learn that complex new software your company just rolled out.
Exactly. And when that battery dies, you just default to whatever behaviors are easiest. And I mean, let's be honest, for most of us, those easiest behaviors aren't exactly building the life we want.
No, they really aren't. And it's just a brutal reality of human biology, honestly. We expect this incredibly complex piece of neurological machinery to just perform perfectly under relentless pressure.
Right.
But we never actually look under the hood to see how the engine operates. We treat our minds like a finished, static product rather than what they actually are, which is an active, ongoing construction site.
Which is exactly why we are embarking on this deep dive today. We are pulling together this massive wealth of research. I mean, we're talking cutting-edge neuroscience, executive leadership, rapid skill acquisition.
Yeah, habit formation, the deep psychology of relationships. It's a gold mine.
It really is. And the mission for you today, listening to this, is simple, but it is massive. We are going to reverse engineer the architecture of a resilient, high-performing human mind.
Love it.
We're going to figure out how you can thrive in absolute chaos, learn complex skills at lightning speed, and, build bulletproof relationships.
And, while those might sound like completely separate domains like business, accelerated learning, romantic relationships, they actually all hinge on one central unifying biological mechanism.
Neuroplasticity.
Exactly. It's your brain's remarkable ability to adapt, rewire, and heal itself. If, and this is a big if, you give it the right instructions, everything we are unpacking today comes down to neuroplasticity and the specific systems you build around it.
Okay, so let's start right in the deep end, looking at what we'll call the mental gym. Because the modern environment, especially if you are an entrepreneur or a high achiever, is basically a cortisol factory.
Oh, absolutely. It's nonstop.
I mean, the data from the National Institute of Mental Health is staggering on this. Nearly half, 49% of all entrepreneurs struggle with mental health issues.
Wow.
Right. That is compared to 32% of the general population. This constant grinding hustle culture is literally breaking our brains.
It is structurally altering them. I mean, chronic stress isn't just an unpleasant feeling, right? It is a chemical event.
Yeah.
When you are constantly stressed, you are basically marinating your brain in cortisol. Over time, that actually shrinks the prefrontal cortex, which is the area responsible for advanced decision-making and emotional regulation.
And it enlarges the amygdala, right?
Yeah.
The fear center.
Exactly. Which is where Sherzan Shamin's concept of positive intelligence, or PQ, becomes incredibly relevant here. The focus shifts from simply trying to eliminate stress, which, let's face it, is impossible in a high-stakes environment.
Totally impossible.
Right. So it shifts to actively building what he calls your self-command muscle.
Okay, let's unpack this self-command muscle, because the methodology relies on something called PQ reps.
Yes.
And these are essentially 10-second mental exercises you can do with your eyes open or closed. The goal is to shift your brain's electrical activity away from that saboteur region, that anxious, hypercritical part of the brain, and engage the sage region, which is grounded and clear.
Right, the focused part.
But, okay, let me push back on this a little bit. Doing a 10-second mental rep sounds like doing a single bicep curl for your brain.
Right.
I mean, is 10 seconds really enough to rewire a stressed-out founder who is staring down a massive financial deficit?
Well, what's fascinating here is the actual mechanism of how neuroplasticity operates in real time. Because the brain isn't a fixed entity, it behaves exactly like a muscle.
Okay.
When you are in a state of panic over that deficit, your neural pathways are essentially defaulting to a deeply worn, high-speed highway of anxiety.
Because you've practiced being anxious so much.
Exactly. So a 10-second PQ rep, like, say, rubbing two fingers together with such intense focus that you can actually feel the microscopic ridges of your fingerprints.
Oh, wow.
Or closing your eyes and intensely isolating the furthest sound you can hear. That acts as the neurological pattern interrupt.
So it's like throwing a stick into the spokes of the anxiety wheel.
Yes. Perfect analogy. It forces an immediate physical shift in blood flow and electrical activity away from the amygdala and right back into the prefrontal cortex.
That makes a lot of sense.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, mental fitness isn't about ignoring the fire in the building. It is the cognitive conditioning required to calmly read the evacuation map, find the fire extinguisher, instead instead of just running down the hall screaming.
Right. And it's not just mental exercises either. Look at Jeff Weiner, the former CEO of LinkedIn.
Oh yeah, his calendar.
He literally schedules blank reflection time into his daily calendar. Just empty, unstructured space to process information. Plus, there is a massive physical component to this mental gym in the sources.
The nutrition and exercise side.
And we see a huge emphasis on omega-3 fatty acids, B vitamins, and specifically group workouts. You're using your physical body to change your brain chemistry, lowering that systemic cortisol load through community and cardiovascular exertion.
You are. And this is a big but there is a very dangerous trap here that catches almost everyone. Knowing that you should eat omega-3s or do your PQ reps or schedule reflection time, that is vastly different from actually executing those behaviors on a Tuesday morning when your inbox is exploding and you're running late for a meeting.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to that battery we talked about at the start. If willpower inevitably depletes by 8 o'clock at night, how do we actually sustain these habits?
That's right.
The answer lies in bypassing that willpower battery altogether. We have to look at the actual mechanics of habit formation.
Yeah, the psychological term for that drained battery is ego depletion. Your willpower is a finite, easily exhaustible cognitive resource.
So it literally runs out.
Exactly. Every decision you make, every temptation you resist, every difficult email you draft, that all drains that battery. Relying on sheer motivation to build the architecture of your mind is a mathematically losing game. You have to rely on systems.
There is a fascinating Swedish study in the materials that explains exactly why this happens. It discovered that we actually have 2 parallel learning systems operating in the brain.
This part is so cool.
It really is.
Yeah.
So first, you have the dopamine-driven reward system. This is located in the decision-making areas of the brain. That is the massive rush of excitement and motivation you feel when you first decide to start a new gym routine or launch a new project.
It's a honeymoon.
But then you have the repetition-based system,
Yeah.
which is governed by a completely different region called the striatum.
And understanding the physiological handoff between those two systems is basically the holy grail of human behavior.
Yeah.
When you first start a new behavior, the dopamine system is running the show. You do the workout, you feel incredibly virtuous, you get a rush. But because of how our neurochemistry regulates itself, that reward feeling inevitably fades.
Right, the dopamine hits get smaller and smaller.
Exactly.
And here's where it gets really interesting. We eventually stop craving that initial reward, right? The excitement totally vanishes. But if we've repeated the action enough times, we just keep going to the gym anyway.
Yep.
Why? Because the striatum takes over. And the striatum doesn't care about dopamine, it doesn't care about motivation, and it doesn't even care if you're happy.
No, it doesn't.
It only cares about repetition. It takes the behavior and makes it an automatic, deeply grooved subroutine. I mean, it is the literal difference between a baby's brain, which is a blank canvas of endless possibility but no automatic routines, and an adult's brain, which is heavily grooved with these highly efficient, striatum-driven habits.
This is exactly why the mechanics of the cue routine reward loop are critical to intercepting bad habits.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, if you are trying to stop stress eating junk food every afternoon, you cannot simply command yourself to stop using your prefrontal cortex. Your striatum has hardwired that loop.
So willpower won't work.
Not long term. To break it, you have to intercept the mechanism. You change the context of the cue by literally not keeping the food in the house. Or you substitute the reward with a quick walk outside. You have to engineer your environment so that the good habit is the path of least neurological resistance.
And you start impossibly small, right? To sneak past the amygdala's resistance to change.
Exactly.
You use the 2-minute rule. You don't try to read a book a week. You commit to reading 1 single page a night.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a Stanford study tracking high-stress individuals that showed maintaining just 7 of these micro, daily mental strength habits reduced their overall cortisol levels by a staggering 30%.
30%.
In just 6 weeks.
That is the raw power of systems over willpower. You stop chasing this vague, exhausting idea of excellence, and you start focusing on microscopic systems that you can execute consistently.
Right.
Because once you automate those baseline habits and hand them off to the striatum, you stop spending your precious cognitive bandwidth on daily survival. You free up the mental RAM required to tackle the most demanding task of the modern economy, which is acquiring complex new skills.
Which brings us to the software upgrade phase of the deep dive. MIT economist David Author coined this term, skill polarization. Essentially, the modern economy is aggressively hollowing out the middle. Routine jobs are disappearing. The market now demands constant, rapid upskilling. If you don't know how to learn complex things quickly, you are going to be left behind.
It demands a fundamental structural shift in how we approach learning. Most adults learn passively. They read a book, highlight some text, and just sort of hope it sticks.
Guilty as charged.
Right. We all do it. But to adapt at the speed of the modern market, you need what Anders Erokhane calls deliberate practice, combined with Carol Dweck's growth mindset.
Meaning you have to believe you can actually get smarter.
You have to genuinely neurologically believe your intelligence is malleable. Yeah. And then you have to strategically and sometimes painfully target your exact weaknesses.
Crucially, you don't need to learn everything about a new subject to apply the
Right. Pareto's principle.
Yeah, but let's elevate this beyond just learning a few chords on a guitar. If you are trying to master a complex new coding language like Python, or you need to understand the legal structures of corporate mergers for a new executive role, you don't read the textbook cover to cover.
No, that would take years.
Right. You identify the crucial 20% of the syntax, or the core 20% of the legal clauses that are used in 80% of real-world applications. You isolate the critical mass of utility.
And to encode that 20% effectively, you deploy specific mental models, like you use the Feynman technique.
Oh, I love the Feynman technique.
It's brilliant. You force yourself to explain a dense, complex concept in simple, jargon-free terms, and that immediately exposes the gaps in your own understanding.
If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough.
Exactly. And then you use spaced repetition to hack the brain's forgetting curve.
Okay, let's quickly clarify that curve because it's fascinating.
Yeah.
The brain is literally designed to forget information it doesn't use, right?
Exactly. Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve shows that memory decays exponentially. But if you interrupt that decay by reviewing the material at systematically increasing intervals, say after 1 day, then 3 days, then a week, you force the brain to fire that specific neural pathway again.
And it gets stronger every time.
Yeah, each time it fires, the myelin sheath around the nerve gets thicker, making the memory more permanent. You also apply the rail framework, meaning you ensure your learning actions strictly align with your current stage of skill acquisition.
Oh, right.
Because a beginner needs foundational information and rules, but an advanced practitioner needs to test logic and edge cases. If you use the wrong method for your stage, you just waste time.
Okay, but the mechanism of how we capture all this information is where I really need to advocate for everyone listening.
Oh boy, the note-taking debate.
Yes. There is a huge debate in the sources between digital and analog note-taking. Now, the Cornell method is the gold standard for analog. You divide a physical page into a section for notes, a column for keywords or cues, and a block at the bottom for a summary.
Very structured.
Very. But I have to stop you there, because my entire life is on my laptop. I can type 80 words a minute. Writing by hand feels like going back to the Stone Age.
I hear this all the time.
Right. So if typing is so much faster, and I can capture so much more data, am I really sabotaging my learning?
You are. I'm sorry, but you are. And it comes down to a neurological process called encoding.
Okay.
When you type quickly, you are essentially functioning as a human transcription machine. The information goes into your ears and straight out through your fingertips. You are capturing verbatim copy, but you are completely bypassing the deep cognitive processing centers of your brain.
Oh, wow. Because it's too easy.
Yes. When you write by hand, because the physical act is so much slower, your brain is forced to act as a filter. You cannot write down every word, so you have to synthesize, summarize, and distill the information on the fly just to keep up.
So the struggle is the point.
That very act of struggling to summarize is the friction that encodes the information into your long-term memory.
The friction is the learning.
Precisely. However, you don't have to throw your laptop away.
Thank goodness.
The ideal strategy is actually a hybrid approach. You process initially by hand to force the encoding, but then you use digital tools like Rome Research or Notion to build what we call a cognitive scaffold.
Right, linking things together.
Yeah, instead of using rigid, traditional folder structures where a file lives in one place and dies there, you use bidirectional learning. You connect ideas across completely different disciplines, mimicking how the human brain actually networks and associates information.
You are creating a literal second brain.
Exactly.
Okay, let's step back and look at the machine we've built so far. We have used neuroplasticity to build automated striatum-driven habits, which freed up massive cognitive bandwidth.
Yep.
We used that bandwidth to deploy deliberate practice, spaced repetition, and bidirectional cognitive scaffolds to learn incredibly fast. We have built an absolute intellectual juggernaut.
We have, but there's a glaring, catastrophic vulnerability in this architecture.
Right. Because all the rapid learning and habit optimization in the world is completely useless if you lose your temper, burn bridges with your colleagues, and can't handle interpersonal conflict.
It all falls apart.
Yeah, your intellect might be highly upgraded, but if the emotional software running the machine is outdated, the entire system crashes.
Yeah.
We have to talk about the core processor, emotional maturity.
And we really must draw a very sharp, crucial distinction here between emotional intelligence and emotional maturity.
They aren't the same thing.
Not at all. Emotional intelligence, or EI, is essentially just awareness. It is your ability to recognize that your chest is tight and you are angry, or to read the room and see that your executive team is frustrated.
Okay.
But emotional maturity is the application and the accountability of that awareness.
It's the difference between pointing at a ticking bomb and saying, hey, that's a bomb, versus actually having the steady hands to defuse it.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. Neurologically, this is a real-time battle between the amygdala, your brain's primal reactive fear center, and the prefrontal cortex, which handles logic, impulse control, and long-term planning.
And this system is incredibly sensitive to your physiological inputs, right?
Extremely.
For instance, the sources show that a lack of REM sleep, which is a very common symptom in conditions like alcohol use disorder, actually causes severe hyperactivity in the neural circuits that process negative emotions. Without adequate REM sleep, your amygdala becomes hyperreactive. Your baseline for panic is basically lowered.
You are physiologically primed to assume the worst in every interaction.
Yeah. And we see how this manifests in leadership as emotional fusion.
Oh, that's dangerous.
It is. That is when an immature leader becomes overly dependent on their team's validation. They take every setback personally. They physically cannot separate their own internal emotional state from the emotional state of the group. Interestingly, there is a fascinating physiological difference in how men and women might process this. The research indicates that women may use positive refocusing, which physically activates the ventral striatum to downregulate negative emotion more frequently than men.
They are literally rerouting the brain's focus to a reward pathway to cool down the fear pathway.
Wow. But wait, let me push back on this whole concept of emotional regulation for a second.
Sure.
Isn't emotional reactivity sometimes completely justified? I mean, if a business partner steals from you or a spouse crosses a massive, unforgivable boundary, shouldn't the amygdala sound the alarm? Aren't we supposed to get furiously angry?
This raises such an important question, and it's a very common misconception about emotional regulation. Experiencing a strong, intense primary emotion, like blazing anger when a boundary is crossed, is entirely natural and biologically necessary.
Okay.
Emotional maturity is not about suppressing the alarm bell. It is about what happens in the millisecond after the alarm goes off. Maturity is creating a psychological gap between the trigger and your response.
So it's not just reacting blindly on autopilot.
Right. It's pausing in that agonizing gap, consulting your prefrontal cortex, and choosing a response rooted in logic and boundaries, rather than impulse, yelling, and defensiveness. It's fully validating the anger without letting the anger drive the car.
And this ability to regulate our emotions to, sit in that uncomfortable gap doesn't just spontaneously generate out of nowhere when we turn 18.
No, definitely not.
Where does this software actually come from?
Well, it is deeply rooted in our earliest connections, and it dictates exactly how we handle inevitable conflicts with the people we love the most. Which brings us to the final layer of our blueprint: secure attachment and the art of repair.
Yeah, we are looking at attachment theory here, the foundational psychological work of Ainsworth, Main, and Solomon. They categorized how human beings connect into four main styles: secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized.
These styles are forged in our earliest childhood experiences with our primary caregivers. For example, if a caregiver is chronically unresponsive or inconsistent, a child's developing brain adapts by forming an anxious attachment style, constantly fearing abandonment and hyperfixating on any slight sign of rejection.
And this is the most hopeful, incredible part of everything we've looked at today. We are not doomed by our childhoods.
No, we aren't.
Because of that beautiful biological mechanism we started with, neuroplasticity, our brains can literally heal. Through therapy, rigorous self-awareness, and consistently engaging in healthy relationships, you can develop what is called earned secure attachment. You can rewrite the foundational code of how you love.
Yes, and the absolute proving ground for that new code is how you handle conflict.
Oh, absolutely.
Insecure attachments view conflict as a life or death threat to survival. Secure attachment views conflict as an opportunity for deeper understanding. We see this with the concept of the argument hangover.
Ugh, the argument hangover.
Yeah, that miserable lingering period of cold distance after a fight.
It's the worst.
To shortcut that hangover, we lean heavily on the Gottman method for relationship repair.
And the tactics for this repair are incredibly practical. It's stepping away from accusatory absolute language like, you always do this, and moving toward vulnerable internal statements like, I feel overwhelmed, I need some clarity.
Much better approach.
But I have to say, my absolute favorite detail of everything we've reviewed, and this is a highly specific, slightly quirky tactic, is a couple who intentionally challenges each other to physically shake your ass when they feel the tension escalating into a screaming match during a tiff.
It sounds totally absurd on the surface, but neurologically, it is absolutely brilliant.
Right, I was laughing out loud when I read it, but the mechanism makes perfect sense. It means you literally have to move the stress hormones, that surging cortisol we talked about, out of your physical body before you can reason with your partner's mind. You are forcing a break in the physical state of the argument.
Exactly. You are intervening to prevent what the Gottman Institute calls physiological flooding.
Flooding.
During a heated argument, if your heart rate spikes over 100 beats per minute, your prefrontal cortex shuts down. You literally, biologically lose access to empathy, logic, and rational thought.
You are just two amygdalas screaming at each other.
Exactly. By doing something highly physical and slightly ridiculous, you force the nervous system to perform a hard reset. You lower the heart rate. You bring the prefrontal cortex back.
And that is the absolute crux. Secure attachment isn't this pristine fairy tale idea of never fighting. That's a complete myth.
It's all about the rupture and repair process. Two humans sharing a life, a business, or a household will inevitably rupture. Boundaries will be bumped, profound misunderstandings will happen, feelings will be hurt.
It's just human nature.
Yeah, but secure attachment is the deep neurological confidence that you can repair the rupture. By actively listening, taking genuine accountability, and then deliberately sharing new positive experiences after a fight, the relationship actually becomes stronger and more resilient than it was before the conflict even happened.
The mended joint becomes stronger than the original bone.
Beautifully said.
Okay, let's step back and look at the entire blueprint we've drafted today. We set out to reverse engineer the architecture of a resilient, high-performing mind. And the through line is so incredibly clear.
It really is.
You start at the base, using the biological magic of neuroplasticity to build automatic, striatum-driven habits. You use the cognitive bandwidth freed up by those habits to rapidly acquire complex new skills using deliberate practice and bidirectional cognitive scaffolds.
Yeah.
And finally, you protect all of that intellectual growth by cultivating the emotional maturity to pause between trigger and response, and the secure attachment required to repair the inevitable ruptures with the people who matter most.
It is a profound, actionable framework. But if we connect this all to the bigger picture, it leaves us with something really fascinating to ponder. Throughout all this research, the ultimate goal is optimization. We are using these tools to optimize ourselves for flawless productivity, more peace, and smoother relationships. But we are rapidly moving into an era where artificial intelligence can learn facts instantly. AI can synthesize complex information flawlessly. It can even be programmed to simulate perfectly regulated, non-reactive emotional responses.
So it's the perfect, unbreakable system.
Exactly. And because of that, perhaps the pursuit of being perfectly optimized and unbreakable is a race we shouldn't actually be trying to win.
Wait, really?
Yeah, think about it. Perhaps our messy, unpredictable human ruptures, the moments we fail, we misunderstand each other, we get flooded with emotion, and the profound, beautiful, highly vulnerable work required to repair those ruptures with another human being. Perhaps that friction will become the most valuable, irreplaceable part of the human experience.
Wow. We started this deep dive talking about reverse engineering a machine, something precise, rigid, and binary. But maybe the mind is less like a machine and more like a living ecosystem. It breaks, it adapts, it regrows, and the scars of our repairs are exactly what make it structurally sound.
Exactly right.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take that idea with you today. Take a deep breath, do a quick 10-second PQ rep, and go conquer your day.